Okay, sorry, a little late, but there's, I guess, no real set schedule. Anyways, here we are back again to do another chapter reading from the first book, The Magic Paintbrush. And I'll talk a little bit before I get started. Okay, so yesterday we read probably one of my favorite chapters in the book, Fragonard's Dream in the Garden of Rococo. And tonight we will be reading, what's this chapter? Oh yeah, The King's Portrait. So that certainly will be interesting. Things are going to take a turn and start to pick up. We are at the halfway point in the book. So, yeah. And by the end of this, so we'll have, yeah, we're getting close to the halfway point here. Probably this weekend, I do writing advice on this channel too, unconventional writing advice, because I just feel like all the internet gurus out there, all they want to talk about is selling you their program or how to craft a book cover that looks like everyone else's book cover, and how to sell to a market that doesn't want anything new, fresh, or how to just basically repeat what the other guy did so you can sell a few books, which I've always found thoroughly disgusting. So I'm going to do a writing talk sometime this week in another live video talking about the actual craft of writing, which is, I feel, something none of these internet gurus actually do. I don't know why that is. Maybe they just, I don't know. But I felt like a lot of those internet gurus focus solely on, or they don't focus on the craft of writing. They want to focus on how to sell more books, and how to cater to a market, which, if you're a writer, a real writer, that you find that thoroughly disgusting, you know. So I'm here to, I'll do a video on that this weekend sometime, hopefully. But anyways, tonight I'm going to be reading from my book. In the last chapter, Fragonard had borrowed the magic paintbrush from Botticelli for a night in the garden. And of course, he painted it to life, and that quickly backfired on him, and he had to find a way to paint away all the rhinoceroses and the butterfly flowers and the statues that had come to life. He had to figure out how to undo all that. So let's see here. So I'll be reading, here we are, from this chapter. I'll get into it, but hopefully I miss doing those writing advice videos. And in this book, I guarantee you it's not catered to a market. But I hope you guys have been enjoying everything I've been reading so far. The book is up on Amazon. You can check the playlist if you want to keep up with the other chapters, but it's on Amazon Kindle right now for $2.99, along with that book. This one does not have a Kindle version yet. So I do all my own artwork for the books. Oh, and for tonight, you know, I'm not outdoors, but the bugs have been a problem. I've got a slideshow of my own personal art I thought we could view while I read, actually. Hand-drawn art that you can view while I tell my story. Okay, here we go. The King's Portrait. Months had passed since I first played with the brush. My father was quite happy, as he had survived the whole winter without so much as a cold. Then one day, early in spring, he took on a terrible fever. I remember that time very well. I was taking a stroll with Botticelli through a new hallway added to the castle to display the paintings I had dreamt of over the winter. I was showing him the ones in particular I had created to remember that night I borrowed his brush and tried painting my dreams into a reality. The first painting I showed him was The Path Intersect the Garden, my failed attempts at maintaining a flower bed. He asked why I painted such an entangled mess overgrown with weeds. I said it was a recreation of a dream, or rather a nightmare I had after I ate some bad fruit before going to bed. He said oftentimes our greatest accomplishments come from our deepest fears, especially when one tries to understand them in an abstract manner. Then I showed him Rinaldo in the Enchanted Forest, a scene from a fairy tale my father used to read to me when I was very young. Well, that's what I told him, and I suppose there was a partial truth to it. In actuality, it was a painting meant to display when I finally pulled that last weed in the courtyard. It was by sheer luck I happened to stumble upon the root of the problem. All right, where was I? Sorry. One thing I learned from that night, you're not a man until you've wrestled a 14-foot-tall rhododendron. The next piece was simply called February. He really took special note and marked on how the horse in the painting looked familiar to him. I explained it was what I thought the one he saw on the island might look like. He said it bore poor resemblance, but that it did strangely look like a horse he'd seen in a reoccurring dream over the winter. I laughed and told him we were truly kindred spirits, because it seemed we shared the same dreams at night. He agreed, and then we continued to look at more paintings. While I was showing him the next piece, discussing the finer points and overall composition I'd chosen to go with, Grantwood stepped into the room and told me I better go to my father's chambers. He said he was feeling quite ill and was unable to get out of bed. I dropped everything immediately and rushed to his side. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. His face was pale, his forehead was burning up, and he had a persistent cough. It hadn't been since last summer when I'd seen him this depraved and out of breath. Hold on, I'm gonna... Just because Here, let's just look at this. We'll look at this drawing for a while. I asked if there was anything I could do. He said not to worry. He'd been through this before, and he was sure he'd be fine after a good night's rest. I returned a little while later with a painting called January to help cheer him up. I hung it on the wall next to his bedside as a reminder of what our kingdom once looked like in the winter, before Botticelli freed us from the icy winds and the torrential downfalls of snow. He said it was my finest work. It proved my worth to him not only as a painter, but more importantly as a son who stuck with it and succeeded beyond his wildest expectations. By the end of the week, my father took a turn for the worse. It seemed he might not last more than a few days at best. I cried many tears by his bedside and prayed continuously throughout the night he'd show a sign of recovery, but by the next day it was obvious he wasn't getting any better. He was always good to me. He taught me everything I know, young Stefan. So anything I could have sacrificed would have been an easy thought. I went for a stroll around the courtyard to deal with this troubling, unexpected turn in his health. Grantwood was consoling me for my grief when a foolish thought entered my mind. The brush, it could do almost anything. The possibilities were endless, limited only by one's imagination. I'd moved stars, created a lavish garden of paradise, and built an entire kingdom with a single stroke of luck from that brush. It had to work. It just had to. I went out to the fields to ask him if this dream of mine were possible. I remember the grass around the two hills had grown in unusually wild and untamed, tailored to Botticelli's eccentric lifestyle. There was a double rainbow that was beginning to fade in a dizzy haze over the flowers he'd painted the night before. There he was on top of his mountain of grass and flowers, taking a nap under the shade of that tree he was so fond of. I shrugged him on the shoulders, pleading with desperate emotions. Botticelli, please, wake up. There isn't enough time. You must come with me at once. He slowly got up from his nap as his eyes resisted the urge to close. Why have you disturbed me so early in the day? Isn't there some chores that must be taken care of? My father, he is on his deathbed as we speak. If your brush is truly magical, then I was wondering if you could save his life with it. He rubbed his eyes clean and replied, Is this what's bothering you? I've never performed such a spell with the brush. I'm not even sure if it would work. There could be consequences far beyond my understanding. I realize this, but if we don't do something, surely he will pass. Botticelli put a hand on his chin as he thought it over. All right, Fragonard, I'll see what I can conjure up. But in order for a dream as grand as this to come to fruition, I'll need all the sleep I can get so that my mind can wander and dream of such a spell. I asked how much sleep he would need to dream this dream of dreams impossible to most, but certainly not for the painter. He said we'll just have to wait and see. I thanked him and told him if there was anything I could do, don't hesitate to ask, and he would receive. He said in fact there was as he propped his back up against the tree with a big smirking, crooked grin. Oh, there is one thing you could do for me. Round up all the paint in the kingdom, every last drop that you can find. If I do conjure up such a dream, I will need every shade at my disposal. I promise, on my word as a prince, you'll have every last drop of paint in this kingdom by nightfall. He then pulled his hat down and in a snide manner said, Now I'm awfully tired. Please, leave me alone so I can finish with my dream. I thanked him again for offering his magic, and then I visited with my father to tell him the good news. Though I should have paid closer attention to Botticelli's callous behavior. My father's complexion was supremely dark. The fever had taken even more out of him. I told him Botticelli was dreaming of a cure as we spoke. He said not to worry. All that mattered is that if he should pass, he was glad to know I would inherit a kingdom of wealth, no longer in poverty, and that he knew he'd raised a son whom would be good to the people. Oops. He then asked the one question any son fears a father will ask when lying on their deathbed. He wanted to know if he was a good father who'd been good to his son throughout his life. Of course I said yes. That was an easy question to answer. Boy. My father tried to speak again, but I told him to rest. He'd need it. Then I assured him Botticelli would find a way to cure him. Though secretly, deep down, I questioned if that were even true for someone as talented as him. The next night I was called to my father's bedside. He was on his last few breaths, as all the kingdom's paint lay before him at Botticelli's request. I held his frail hand, and he smiled back. I could tell he was at peace, knowing his son and closest friends were by his side. I called for Botticelli to be brought to my father's chambers. His fate was left up to his dream and my worst nightmare. Word came back that he was in such a deep slumber no one could break its spell. No matter, at least I knew he tried, the only way he knew how. Ooh, hold on. There we go, get another one to look at. I was sure the light in his eyes would fade when my father's chamber doors swung open. Botticelli the painter walked in with brush in hand, an easel under his arm and a rather small canvas. He had an excited look in his eyes. He told us not to worry. He had a grand vision while asleep on his bed of flowers. I cleaned my face of tears, wide-eyed and hopeful. Then I asked about this dream he conjured up. First, he said everyone but me must leave the room, and if we valued his life, we'd act at once and do exactly as he asks. Grantwood was the last one out the door. He left shaking his head, unsure to trust this man that had turned his fields into a grove of useless flowers. Botticelli locked the door, and then he told us of his dream. He said in order to save my father, he would have to paint his portrait by painting him onto the canvas. This wouldn't cure him, but it would prolong his life until he could think of the exact mixture to paint him back to health. The idea seemed a bit far-fetched, But at the time, I felt there was no other choice, so I nodded in agreement for Botticelli to commence with his plan. Botticelli nodded back, and then he set the easel down next to my father's bedside and carefully placed the canvas on it. He then dipped the brush into some white paint, the shade of the canvas, and swiped it across his blank slate. The canvas grew in size until there was enough room for my father's entire stance. I watched as he mixed together color after color with madness in his eyes, until finally he had what he needed laid out on his palette. He then set up the rest of his things and got to work. Swipe after swipe, my father slowly appeared before me on the canvas. When Botticelli was done applying the last stroke, he stepped back, admiring his handiwork. I was mesmerized by this spell he placed over him. It was also unbelievably strange. He could speak and move freely, just as I speak to you now, young Stefan. Every single wrinkle on his face was completely visible. His eyes, they beveled in a glossy sheen. The colors of his clothes and the way his ruby-red robe swayed. It was as if he'd blended reality with the oils on his palette, producing perhaps his finest work. My father had this distinguished look of pride, though I knew this isn't what he wanted. I assumed it would only be temporary. I'll never forget my father's voice, the words he spoke to me. It sounded like an enchanting echo ringing through the thick veneer of paint. My son, and only heir, the task of taking care of the kingdom is in your hands now. Rule wisely over the people. Do not squander the powers I have over the past few months, but with the principles this kingdom was founded on, the ones that I've instilled in you over the years. I promised him I would abide by his wishes, on my word as a humble servant of the people. I then met up with Botticelli atop the bell tower to discuss what he would need to do next. He was crafting the stars, orchestrating something grand and magnificent. I could tell the way his crooked smile lifted and the way his eyes sparkled as he played with the dreamy essence of the cosmos. It's an awfully quiet night, Fragonard. You can hear the wind creating a dream of its own. Isn't it beautiful? It is, I suppose, in its own majestic way. Yes, it is, to me. Tell me, do you have a dream of your own? I mean one that isn't your father's. I'd like to have a dream of my own, someday. All I really care about right now is my father's health. Why do you ask? Well, what if your father doesn't pull through? If I can't save his life, then he did leave you in charge of the kingdom. If he doesn't pull through, I'll be left with a lot on my plate. There will no longer be time for such foolish things as dreams when there's work to be done. Work? Think of it, Fragonard. A dream beyond all we know is reality. Free from the trappings of society where artists such as ourselves can do whatever we please without worry. Your father would never understand such a dream. He would squander it. But you and I. It would be a wonderful dream. I don't doubt it. But without my father, it wouldn't be a dream worth having. Botticelli left it at that. I could tell he wasn't happy with my reply, but my mind was somewhere else, as you can imagine. The next night I waited patiently as Botticelli struggled into the wee hours trying to blend together a palpable hue to my father's likeness. By midnight, Botticelli threw his palette down. He didn't have to say a word. He was exhausted, pushed beyond the brink of his capabilities. Perhaps this was his dream, the one he could not obtain, that it lay beyond the stars. Well, it certainly was mine. I told him it'd be all right if he took a break. He more than earned it. Besides, my father was safe for now, as far as I knew. He asked to be left alone with a week of no disturbances to help keep his mind clear and allow for his dream to fully come to fruition. He painted a door on my father's wall, next to his bedside. He opened it up and asked if I would help him with another task. I moved the paint inside the closet so the secret to his well-being would be safe and secure. Once again, I did all the work while Botticelli sat back and watched, but I was glad to know it was for a good cause. After the paint was secured in this mystical closet of sorts, he shut the door and painted a magical lock over it, his brush being the key. My father's fate was now in the hands of a true, masterful painter. And there we go. That's the end of that chapter. And we're actually now beyond the halfway point. Oop. And here, I'll go back here. There we go. The magic paintbrush. What are we on? Chapter 9 now? Chapter 10? The next chapter is The Madness of King Fragonard. So we'll see what happens next. So that was an interesting chapter. Fragonard's father fell ill and had to be painted onto a canvas. But we'll find out what happens in the next chapter. And tomorrow will be the last reading for this week from this book. So I hope you'll tune in tomorrow night. As always, thanks for listening. The Magic Paintbrush. The rest of the chapter readings are up on my channel under the playlist Chapter Readings. And it is for sale on Amazon. Amazon Kindle for $2.99. That's a pretty good deal. So you can always give it a read or give me a review. That'd be awesome. And so is The Greatest Storm, Book 2. But yeah, and so this weekend as well, I'll hopefully be doing an author talk or a writing talk. And giving writing advice. Or at least, bench writing advice, authentic writing stuff. How old are you? Hundreds, centuries. Centuries old. I've been trapped in a painting for over 500 years. I'll leave it at that. Thanks guys for tuning in. Tune in tomorrow night for The Madness of King Fragonard, and we'll continue to listen to the tale of Aidan Fragonard, the boy trapped in the painting.